right, so the Delta MERP program started 6 years ago, and this is the last year of the program. We are actually made up of 4 different agencies. So I work for the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy. There's also the Department of Water Resources. We also have the California Department of Public Health, and we also, our last agency that partners with us is the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. And they're located in Rancho Cordova. That's actually where my office is. What we do is every year we have a stakeholder meeting, and we're hoping to have our stakeholder meeting in January, so we would love to extend the invitation now. Everyone is welcome. It's always a public forum. People come to see what our program's doing because we do use taxpayer dollars to implement our program, and so it's very important to us that we get the feedback we need to improve our materials and also provide the services that we aim to give. Let me see. So today, part of our training goals is that you understand what our goals are for MERP and understand which choices are healthy and which fish choices are the most important. We're going to be going over the different advisories because, like I said, the Delta has 3 different advisories. There's the Sacramento North Delta, there's San Joaquin River, and then we also have the South Delta regions, and they all have different safe to eat fish. Today we're going to go over those advisories, benefits, along with, if you are not aware, what mercury actually is and how we consume it, what it does to our bodies, and how they actually get into the environment, how they get into the fish. These are just concepts that we want you to have a basic understanding of. We don't expect you to understand everything about chemicals and toxins, but if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me. I am a scientist, so I can give you a brief explanation. We will be going over the whole process a little later. So we just have a little quick warm-up just so you can talk amongst yourselves, and I would just like to know if you do eat any fish, or if your family eats any fish, what type of fish you eat, and where do you get your fish from? I'm just going to give you guys a couple minutes to talk to each other and answer these questions.
I eat a lot of fish. You know, more like 400, 500 fish. Right? Fish from the market. So I have no idea where it comes from. In the market.
Okay, what type of fish is it? Is it really big fish? Catfish? Yeah, no, that's good.
How often?
Catfish is actually on our advisory list.
I don't know what
Get from the farm or somewhere.
That. Okay, my son experienced that.
Only the fish.
There has been a couple of times when friends who like to fish, they actually gave us a present, fresh fish, and we cooked it and so on. And then I started thinking, is this, okay, it's local waters, local rivers, but I wasn't sure, is it really safe? These questions came into my mind, but I never got the exact answers. And I sort of stopped accepting these free gifts. Otherwise, I usually get salmon from the stores.
Stores? That's very common. Salmon and tuna, a lot of certain fish are very common in the stores, but if you want anything else, it's usually you have to get it yourself. But we'll go over
Fish with her, and it's just a family.
Interesting topic. I like it.
It's kind of great to hear all of you talk about fishing. It seems like everyone here has at least tried fish. There's been times where I've provided this training. People don't fish, people know nothing about fish, and I love coming to places where fish is a part of your culture, and it's a very important component of your diet and your health. And our whole point of the training today is not to tell you don't eat fish. That's never our message. Our message is always going to be what the healthier options are and what we recommend, because we understand how important fish is to many cultures as a primary source of your diet. And again, there is certain ways of reducing harm. So it's not something that we say no to. If that were the case, then we wouldn't even tell you what fish are safe to eat. We would only tell you the no list. But again, thank you so much for sharing. As I mentioned before, our materials, we have these brochures. I'm going to pass this around. And in our brochures, we have the different advisory information. Again, I'm going to go over what this means, but explains how big a portion size is, which fish to avoid, how much fish you can have per week, and also which advisory region it applies to. We have different types of materials. So this is a brochure format. We also have placemats and stickers and these large road grade signs. And we've had those posted. That's going to be a big part of the survey project. So I'm going to pass this around. You're welcome to ask any questions. As of now, a lot of these languages that we have translated this information into was a huge effort from SAAC initially 6 years ago. So a lot of these materials still exist today, and we offer them to a lot of different nonprofit groups. And we also work with public health centers. We also go to local bait shops and businesses, and we drop off a lot of these informational pamphlets so that the information gets spread. As I said before, there's 3 different forms of information. We have the Northern Delta, which is north of Highway 12. It's Rio Vista, and it extends all the way to Sacramento. So that's primarily the Sacramento River and the accompanying water bodies there. We have the Central and South Delta. It's everything hitting south of Highway 12, and it goes all the way up to Stanislaus County. So when you hit Highway 84 and you go all the way down, you'll hit Highway 12, and that's where the start of the Central South Delta is. It goes into the Bay Area. So the Bay Area has a different advisory, but the rivers going into the Bay those are a part of the Delta. And that includes the San Joaquin River. But specifically for the San Joaquin River, they've done testing, and you can see on the far right image, the one with the tan outline, the Central South Delta has part of the San Joaquin River, but the San Joaquin River goes all the way past Fresno and goes all the way to Friant Dam, which is about 4 or 5 hours from here, and that whole river has a separate advisory. They have different fish in that river and different recommendations. So what we're going to go over today is just what MERP is in these presentation slides, but then I will also go over the whole survey process and how we're going to go into the Delta. These are some helpful links. I'm going to leave these slides here for you anytime you want to review. The Safe to Eat portal, that is on a different website, and they offer information for all the other rivers. So if you're not fishing in San Joaquin River, and let's say you're fishing in Deer Creek, or you're going up north to Shasta and you don't know which fish are safe to eat, you can go to this portal and they will let you know which ones are safe to eat from which regions. The Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, they're one of our partners for MERP. They also created a fish map, so if you're going to go fishing, you can click on the map and click where you are in California and see what the local fish around you are that are safe to eat. So if you ever come across people who are asking you, okay, well, I don't fish in these regions, I don't fish in the Delta, do you have any information about how to fish from the ocean, or how to fish from Southern California? All of that information is linked through the OHIA website, and on every single one of our materials, In the top, in the bottom corner, it's always going to say ohia.ca.gov/fish. This is always going to be the main link to take you to any of those links that you need. So we always have a way to provide additional information, and you don't have to know any of this information on top of your head. We're expecting you just to be able to lead people to where they need information, and if you ever do come across a question, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be leaving my business card here. Feel free to grab one. I am in the office from Monday through Thursday. I'm out of the office on Fridays, but again, I will get back to you as quickly as I can. So you know where we've posted these road grade signs. We post them at fishing access locations, so wherever there's public access or fishing occurs, we post right by the water, and those green dots are spots that we've gone out and posted. This map is a little outdated. This has primarily the 25 sites that we're going to be sending SAAC to, which we'll be providing next week once the contract is signed. But a lot of the sites that we've posted are in Sacramento, and they extend past Rio Vista. They go all the way out to Stockton and Manteca, but it is all within one triangle. You can see that they're kind of clustered around near highways, and they're usually at regional parks or at marinas or harbors. We're trying to just reach out to people who fish daily or fish often enough that mercury would affect their bodies. As I've mentioned before, there's these 3 advisories, so there's these 3 different regions. We also created 3 different signs. So you can see from the first sign, which is Central and South Delta, there's only 2 fish that we recommend not to eat. Whereas if you go to the Sacramento River or Northern Delta, which is the middle sign, there's 4 fish that fall in that category. And it's really important to know that not all rivers and all lakes are the same. A fish might be healthier to eat in a different region compared to a different part of the river. And this has been done through many, many years of testing. They've taken fish out and they've sampled how much mercury has been inside the fish and how many toxins there's been, and then they've compiled the data and they were able to produce these advisories. I currently still go out into the rivers and we still do mercury sampling from the water just to see how much mercury is accumulated in the water itself. And the thing about mercury is once it's in the water, it takes a very, very long time to go away. We'll go over that process as well, but these fish, the reason why we don't update these signs yearly or even after 6 years why these signs are still accurate is because mercury stays within a water body and an environment for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's going to take a very long process before we can remove it from the water and before that affects the fish.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
So I'm thinking that the water continues to flow, but you're saying the mercury stays where it's at then? It doesn't flow along downstream?
Mercury, we can jump ahead a little. Mercury, it stays in the sediment, and
Okay.
and it also is it naturally occurs throughout the environment. So the sheets that I provided you, the mercury transformations poster, talking points. This is the poster, and it looks it's pretty bare. So we have broken down how mercury is affected in different parts of the environment. Mercury itself comes from emissions. Mercury can also be from soil because we have a lot of gold mining. Within gold mining a few hundred years ago, in the 1800s, they used mercury to extract gold from the soil. Because mercury is liquid at room temperature, it would stick to the gold and it would piece it away from the soil. So they used it as a way to collect gold faster. And when they did that, they would get the gold and then they would rinse off the mercury.
Yeah.
That mercury would go back into the soil.
Okay.
And even though it was deep, deep down within the earth, when they extracted it to use it for the gold process, now all that mercury is eroding into our water bodies. And once that mercury falls into our water and it gets absorbed, the water actually is a very beautiful substance. It absorbs a lot of our pollution. So mercury is also in our, mercury and other pollution is in our sky. So water absorbs that as well. So mercury comes from a few different sources, comes into our water, and then the mercury that we have in fish, it's not the metal, it's not the liquid silver thing you can see with your eyes. It actually methylates, which means bacteria gets with it and it breaks it down, and it becomes really, really small particles, which fish breathe in, and it becomes a part of their fish tissue. What happens is you'll see these little fish that have absorbed a lot of mercury within their lungs and within their bodies. Then larger fish eat those fish, and they accumulate mercury stage by stage. So you'll have a very large fish that's consumed a lot of mercury, and those large fish are sports fish. So white sturgeon, you'll see striped bass. People love those fish because they're the biggest fish you can catch, but they're also large predatory fish, so they tend to have the most amount of mercury. This is a whole process. We have mercury mines all throughout California's coast. Mercury is very prevalent in our mountain ranges, and so that's where it was being digged up. And if you've seen that picture of the delta, I'll go back. The coast is right there. You'll see the bay is all pretty much covered with mountains. If you ever go to San Francisco, you'll notice you'll hit a huge mountain range. A lot of that area is mining. And so our biggest thing is we're trying to teach you just a few basic things about mercury, but we do not expect you to retain any of this. So if you do forget these sheets that we have, they're talking points for this poster. And if you ever have any groups here, I know you have a lot of different events. If anyone ever asks questions, I'm not saying that the poster has to be right here wherever you move it. These are just some talking points explaining where mercury comes from the soil, where it comes from in the environment. It's a complicated process, but what you need to know is mercury exists naturally. It's just that we as humans put this man-made problem of putting it straight into our water at very, very large amounts.
So now there are functioning mercury mines nowadays?
Mercury mines, they're all closed in California. There is still mining occurring, which means they still pull up mercury when they dig, but we can go into that. Sorry.
Obviously, we have all the mercury comes from the hundreds of years ago, right? I mean, from their business, whatever they had, right?
Yes. So a huge chunk of what mercury came from is from legacy mining, so old mining. But if you can look at this photo right here, it shows a better picture of how many mines we have in California. So as of now, the amount that we've counted, it's over 300,000 mines. And you can see a huge chunk of them happen to be right where we live. So right by Sacramento, I'm going to show you the little dot. We are right here. And all of these lakes and rivers, they bring down a lot of the mercury into our waterways. So
now the soil under the rivers, it has small particles naturally, or it came there, it's left over from the gold mining.
a very, very small amount occurs naturally. It's very natural to have very small amounts of metals in your food. It's very, very natural to have a lot of different minerals in your water. But I would say over 98% of the mercury in our waters is not due to natural occurring mercury. It's due to us mining. And as of now, it's 92.56 are closed. So about 300,000 of these mines are closed now. But there's many mining sites that we never found because people in the 1800s, they didn't say where they got their gold. They would dig somewhere secretly, and then later we find out, somebody fell in a hole, and then we find out that was another mining area. We don't actively look for these mines, and what we're trying to do is there's a whole different department trying to close all of these mines and stop a lot of the toxins from pouring out because there's lots of effects from mining. But as of now, most of the mines that are still open are in Southern California. And they're right around this region
What
here.
about the gold mines? Are they still functioning?
They are not functioning anymore, no. We've extracted most of the gold. At this point, it costs more to extract gold that's left than the profit is from gold. So you would have to dig very, very, very deep in order to get any more. It used to be so plentiful that you didn't even have to dig. The gold was just flowing down the rivers before in California. And these Trinity Mountains, a lot of the effects here happen to go to the coast straight away, whereas we in Sacramento, we kind of have all the effects of the mercury from our rivers first, and then it pours out to the ocean. But mercury is in soil, and that soil is called cinnabar. And it's a red rock, and it has like little silver bits in it, and it's very pretty, but it's what erodes the quickest. It's like taking a clump of sand and putting it near water, and it'll just break apart very, very fast. I'm just going to head back a little bit. So there are these flyers that we created. These, we call them infographics, and on these sheets, they're both in English and Spanish. We found that a lot of people do not speak English, and we needed to create something that was in a low literacy format because primarily in Sacramento and within the Delta, English is not the first language for many people. And we wanted to emphasize that little fish, smaller, younger fish are good to eat, whereas larger predatory fish are not safe to eat. We're still developing graphics for these, but what we hope to do, because this is at the top, you can see it's a testing graphic, we're hoping to get feedback from SAAC. And part of the grant that we're giving is we want to hear back on our materials so we can improve them and finalize them by the end of this year. And one of the graphic images is how to eat a fish safely. Many cultures, they eat the head, they eat all parts of the fish, the skin, the guts, and we found that the skin and the guts and the head actually have most of the toxins in the fish. It has the most amount of chemicals, has the most amount of mercury. The safest part of a fish is to eat the fillet. And it's very hard to convey that in a message, so we created this graphic showing how to prepare a fish, to take off the skin and to only eat the fillet part. A lot of this is something that we have disagreement with people, but if you can convince someone, if they are still going to eat the head, maybe tell them not to eat the guts, because you're not trying to change everybody's behavior. We're just trying to teach people what a safer method is, and it's not right or wrong. We're just hoping that people reduce their exposure to these toxins over time. Another image that we have is serving size, which is a pretty complicated thing to explain just through picture form. But on the picture on the sheet, you can see that there's an adult and then there is a child, and there's different serving sizes. So for an adult, the normal serving size is the palm of your hand and the thickness of your hand. For a child, it's the same. It's the palm of their hand and the thickness of their hand. It's because your hands are relatively the same, proportionate to who you are as a person. So it doesn't mean all adults have the same size. It just means the palm of your hand, thickness of your hand. And I'm going to pass these around if you want to compare. These are the average sizes that the USDA has approved of.
I have small hands.
You might notice that you might actually be more child size. I'm actually closer to the child size portion than I am the adult size. The adult size is too big for me. And so again, we're trying to encourage that fish is a part of a healthy diet. The reason being is because it has many nutrients. It has a healthy omega-3s, which is important for brain function, for your heart, and for your eyes. We also have done studies showing that health is improved by eating fish that have high levels of omega-3s. It can prevent a lot of different diseases, but it can also decrease certain diseases. And omega-3s are essential to your body. You can receive them from other types of foods, but they're the highest in fish. So you may have noticed already that a lot of our materials have children and women on there, particularly. That's because those are the two groups that are affected the most. So we are emphasizing that all of this messaging is catered towards families and women who may become pregnant. It's important that women still receive those essential omega-3s, but again, there's certain fish that I hope that they avoid, because if they are pregnant, a lot of that, all those toxins pass on to the baby. So what that means is if those toxins do pass on, it's going to affect children more than it affects adults. Men and women over 49 are the least amount affected by eating fish, and women who are younger and children have the highest adverse effects from eating fish that's not healthy. Those are a few of the symptoms that may occur if you have high amount of mercury in your system. These are just a few of the things, but if our recommended advice is if there is any type of health problem and somebody asks you, I don't know, is it mercury poisoning? We can't just look at this list and decide, yes, it's mercury poisoning. We expect you to go see some type of health physician or primary care doctor. We are not allowed to assess that, but these are just some symptoms. And the reason why we know what the symptoms of mercury poisoning are is because of the Minamata Bay mercury poisoning that happened in 1956. What happened was there was a chemical plant that was releasing mercury into the Bay of Minamata in Japan, and they were letting all of this mercury into the water, and all of the fish started dying. And people were eating this fish prior to them dying, and they consumed such large amounts of mercury that people started dying as well. And of the people who ate the fish, which was primarily the whole population, a lot of them had those hearing loss problems, the vision loss, heart attacks, a lot of numbness, loss of sensation in their legs, paralysis. It was a terrible, terrible incident, and prior to that, we didn't actually know that mercury was that harmful because we used it in everyday things like thermometers, and we used them in mining. People handled it with their hands when it actually can go, because it's liquid, it can actually penetrate your skin and get into your blood. We didn't know these things back then until this incident happened, and that's when we as scientists started researching it and learning all the different effects from it. This is one of the most severe cases. We haven't had an incident like this since because it was so fatal. So just to emphasize what mercury is, like I said, those little droplets, they look like little water droplets, but they're silver. That's what mercury looks like at room temperature in nature. And because it's similar to water, because it's malleable like that, it can combine with different compounds and be changed. So the form that I mentioned before that's in fish it's called methyl mercury. It's not pure metal like that people are consuming. It's particles. And it is found in fish, but it's also found in different parts of water bodies. So different plants can absorb them in deep parts of the water. It methylates deep at the bottom of the water body. So it doesn't happen at the top surface. It's mostly accumulating at the bottom, and then it spreads out.
I have a question.
Sure.
So at the step 4, it says do not eat or cook liquid juices. What does it mean?
So with fish, it releases a lot of juice and water when you cook. Some people will use that as a broth, or they'll use the bones as a broth with the marrow. To use that, you're actually using very concentrated parts. You're boiling off all the water, and you're keeping primarily the toxins are getting more concentrated. So it's good to remove any of the skin that might have a lot of the moisture, a lot of where the toxins accumulate are in the more fatty parts of the fish. So guts in general tend to accumulate a lot of the toxins, whereas the fillet, because it's a muscle, the muscle parts have the least amount. I'm not sure if that helps with the answer your question. Of course. So, like I said, this poster, I'll be able to provide a smaller version if this is inconvenient for your office. It shows the sources. It occurs in our environment naturally, but also emissions, so from our cars, through the combustion process of releasing gas into the environment. We have different forms of emissions, from industrial waste to all sorts of things going up into our air. That comes, and it through rain, it'll there's this process called atmospheric deposition. That a lot of those pollutants will go straight into the water, or will go straight into the soil, and then with the soil, it erodes and it breaks down, and it'll bring down all sorts of things into our waterways as well. And the process I mentioned before, you can see when there's low oxygen, which means the deeper you go into the water, the less oxygen there is. And that's usually where the metal mercury breaks down and turns into methyl mercury. So that Hg is the name of the element mercury. So Hg will combine with methylate, which is Me, and it'll form this new form of mercury that is occurring in all sorts of fish life. It gets absorbed by fish, it gets absorbed by clams, mussels, all sorts of fish in the water. And as I mentioned before, the little fish get eaten by bigger fish get eaten by a bigger fish. All of that mercury accumulates in the largest fish, and you can see that big brown fish has the most compared to those little fish. And I also mentioned that a lot of these mining, a lot of this mining has stopped, but the effects of the mining are still in place because all of that soil was already pulled up, and now that soil is breaking down into our waterways. So I've mentioned that there's toxins. A different form of toxin besides mercury, we haven't done enough studies on this, but we know that it occurs in our water. This is man-made. It's called polychlorinated biphenyl. PCBs is the shorter name, and it's similar to mercury because it attaches to soil and different types of organic matter, just like fish. And it was manufactured, again, prior to the 1950s. It was used in paints, caulking, a lot of industrial building. And what's happened is people didn't properly dispose of those chemicals. We didn't have any type of facility to get rid of toxins in a healthy way, and a lot of that has gotten into our water. From batteries to coolants, PCBs are a type of chemical that is man-made and is now also in our water and is getting absorbed by fish. So we haven't been able to test all the different types of PCBs yet, but we do know that if a fish can absorb mercury, they're most likely also absorbing other toxins. So when I talk about other toxins, this is what I'm referring to. If anyone asks you what other toxins you're talking about, you can say that there's toxins from plastics and paints that is going into our water, and those have been absorbed by fish as well, by those small particles. So we do know some risks. They're very similar to mercury. The PCBs are something that can be really, they last a very long time in our waterway, just similarly to this. Even if they come from the mercury mines all the way out in Vallejo, it'll still stay in the waterway all the way up to Tahoe. Like they don't decompose easily. Just like mercury, it'll take hundreds of years before they decay and go away. So the picture on the left is mercury, and the picture on the right is actually PCBs. So it's very, very gross looking. It looks like sludge. So, as I mentioned before, what we are primarily focusing on is fish that is in our waterways in the Delta, but there is also advisories for fish that you buy from the store. Earlier in our talk, we talked about fish that people were eating at home, and a lot of you actually do buy some store-bought fish. Salmon and tilapia, a lot of fish are actually in the green column. They're very commonly eaten. They're also, you're allowed to have 2 servings a week, is just the national recommendation for people. And there's certain fish that are just very, very high amounts of mercury, and that includes more rare fish like swordfish and shark. They can have 80 times the amount of mercury that a normal fish would have. And this is just a quick exercise. Fish, so we're gonna say, raise your hand if you think fish do not contain mercury if the water they're swimming in looks clean.
No.
All right.
This is it.
Yeah, so false. All right, I didn't trick any of you. All right, raise your hand if you think bottom feeders, such as catfish, have the most amount of chemicals.
Correct. Yes.
Actually, false. We're going to learn today that it's not just bottom feeders, it's the fish that are larger, that have consumed a lot more. Other fish tend to have the highest amounts. You'll notice that actually on this chart here, catfish is actually in the middle category. We have larger fish like white sturgeon, and even pike minnow, because it's eating tinier fish, it has higher amounts of mercury than catfish does. So it's not necessarily being a bottom feeder fish means that you're going to have the highest mercury. It's actually the larger, again, fish that eat other fish that tend to be in the left category. Or, sorry, do not eat category. So I did trick you on one.
But the previous screen it said don't eat marlin, but they are found only in the ocean. Marlin, right?
Yes.
It still has a lot of mercury.
Yes, because all of the mercury, even though it comes from our mining, it also comes from a lot of other different sources, like the air and just from boats. A lot of pollution accumulates in the ocean as well, because it's the water will go out to the ocean and then it'll stay in the ocean. Again, fish like shark and marlin just eat a lot of different types of fish, so they tend to accumulate all of that as well. And a lot of the fish that are in our rivers, they don't live in our rivers forever. They do go out to the ocean and then they come back. So they don't live in one spot. A lot of salmon come up river to lay their babies, but they live primarily in the ocean. Or same thing goes with a few of the other fish. There's certain fish that only live in rivers, like rainbow trout, that's native to California, but again, there's so many different types of fish and they all don't stay in one region, so it's very hard to see which ones have higher amounts versus others. But we've noticed that very, very large fish tend to accumulate most of the toxins, and there's actually quite a bit of chemicals that are released into the ocean as well. A lot of dumping happens, a lot of garbage is disposed in the oceans, and that's also why those fish are exposed to so much, even though the ocean is so big. We're going to be educating a lot of vulnerable groups, such as women and children and families and people who do not speak English as their primary language. So I'm hoping that with this training, you'll be able to explain a lot of these messages to those groups. We're hoping that by exposing you to these advisory signs and you seeing our materials, that you'll be able to explain that beyond to other people and be able to demonstrate messaging. My last thing that I wanted to emphasize here is we will be going over this in the survey, but we have both different advisories for two different subgroups. So the top group is women and children, and the bottom group is men and older women. So on the top it says women and children, they can have 2 servings a week of this, but men and older women can have 7. And so even for the do not eat category, women and children should not eat these fish at all, but men and older women can still have 1 to 2 servings a week of this. So it's a huge difference, just seeing how big of a difference it is between women and children and men and older women. Mercury really does affect those 2 different groups very differently.
Is there a flyer for this?
These are actually yes, there is flyers. There's smaller versions of this, but these are the road grade signs, so they're just like those stop signs outside. These are meant to be weatherproof. We've posted these on that map at all of those different locations.
They don't work. I've seen it a lot, but nobody see it.
Yeah.
I just ignore it.
So do any of you have any more questions regarding this part of the training? I'm sorry it's taking so long. So if you could flip the side of that survey around and just answer the questions one more time, you might notice that you have different answers.
have one more survey.
Oh, yeah. Do we? I don't.
So you mean now or before? Now I know.
Yes, so you
Before I
can,
don't know.
that's okay if you didn't know before. If now you know, that's good.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I don't, but.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I do. Sorry. I lied. Here we go. All right. And then when you're done, can you pass them this way? Don't worry, no one's graded. This is just so they can see that I actually offered a training and I didn't just leave work.
No, I need a copy. Is there any more of these?
Yes, we have
have
boxes
there.
full of
I see,
of
okay,
them
okay.
that you'll be given. So the next part of this training, this was just to teach you about the program and Mercury itself. We're going to go over. Sorry, this is not it. Ooh, where did I put it? Attachment one. Okay, so I'm going to pass these out. This is the actual survey of evaluation project that everyone received a grant for. That SAC had proposed costs, and this grant is going to be allocated to you until December 30th. So what we're hoping to do is, of these road grade signs that we posted throughout the Delta, of the 100 signs that we posted, 25 of them have to be evaluated. So we're going to give you a list of 25 sites, and we're hoping that people will go out there. Your staff will conduct this survey. So the survey is, we're going to go over it together. Is there any extras? All right. So this survey is broken down into 3 different parts, A, B, and C. The first part, we're just going to go over the survey instructions, and if you have any questions, please let me know. We can always make adjustments to this. And then we're going to go over the actual survey questions that we're going to ask people when we go out to the Delta. And then part C, this is very important. This is where you're going to take the survey results and put them all together so that when we compile a report in December, we'll have all of the data all on one sheet, and it'll be easier for us to learn what you all learned. So with Section A, which is the survey instructions, there's a pre-survey checklist. So these are things that you're going to be needing in order to go out into the field and conduct this survey. You're going to need copies of this survey form. You're going to need a clipboard and pens. And for the GPS directions and survey sites, that's very easy. If you have your phone with you, you'll be able to just put it in Google Maps, the address, and you'll be able to get to where you need to be. Also, if you have your phone, it's very important. We don't require any of these things, but we suggest that you bring these with you. If you bring your phone, or you will have a camera attached with it, or otherwise you would have to bring a camera for the survey. We'll be giving you all the different site-specific information, so when you do go out, you'll know where to park, where to have your car so you won't have to pay a fee, and all of those different things will be provided to you. In this document alone, we're just going to go over the survey questions. So the instructions for this survey is we are trying to get 4 surveys per site. So when you go out there, we're expecting to come across 4 different people who are about 100 meters from the sign, somewhere within the parking lot, somewhere already fishing, somewhere in that whole park area. wherever it may be, it's just a rough number is 100 yards. If you go beyond that, you're walking way, way too far from the sign. We're hoping to get peak fishing times, so it's harder to catch somebody to do the survey who's fishing if you're not going during fishing times. So we provided some example times of 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. is peak fishing for a lot of fishermen. You'll come across a lot, and as you've seen, a lot of the sites are very close together.
Yeah, early in the morning though.
You have to go really early in the morning, or you have to go at dusk, and that's when you come across a lot of people. And so we understand that this is a survey that is inconvenient. We can't conduct it because as an agency we only work from 9 to 5, and it's very hard for us to get paid to work beyond that. So that's why we reached out to SAC. You have experience, you know fishermen. We hope that this is a survey that won't be too hard. We are expecting a minimum of 3, so if you aren't able to find 4 people at that site, that's okay, but 3 is our minimum. So if you don't find 3 people in the afternoon, you might have to try in the morning to get those other people. And again, you have to it has to be voluntary. You can't force someone saying that we're from the government and you need to take this survey. Please do not get any surveys like that. I will get in trouble. And the person conducting the survey, the surveyor, so you would be the surveyor. You would be holding this form the whole time. You never give it to someone to do it for them, because they might fill out the wrong boxes or their handwriting might not be clear. We're hoping that by giving you all the responsibility that it'll be actually easier. I've done it where people conduct the survey, you get the survey back, you don't even know what box they marked. It looks messy. It's really important that if you're conducting the survey that you hold the survey with you the whole time. On to the next page. There's going to be explanation. These instructions are always good for you to look back at if you don't know how to follow through if something doesn't make sense, but there is like a little written introduction on the next page. There's a lot of different examples of what to do, but you're welcome to use not the script. So if you're out there and you don't always have to, if they already heard your name, you don't have to go to the next person and say the same exact script, especially if they're a family of fishermen. So again, these are just rough guidelines, but these are just basic instructions that we hope help you the most when you do conduct the survey. So we're going to move on to B, and as I go through the survey questions, I'll be going over the instructions. So on page 3, that's section B for the survey questions. And the first line, you're going to write your name. You're going to write down the site name. So you're going to be provided a site. You're going to go there. It'll be like, for example, Brandon Island State Park. It's right by Rio Vista. You drive there. You say, hey, I'm working for the Delta Conservancy. We're a state agency. They'll let you go in. They'll let you park. We've received site permissions everywhere, so these are not places where we're not going to send you anywhere onto someone's private property and anything like that. These are all public, state-owned places. The couple of private places that we will be sending you to, we've already received permission to send you there, so they know that you're coming. It won't be a shock. And if you do come across any problems when you're there, feel free to give me a call. So you write your name, you write the site name, and then participant is the person who you're going to be surveying. So that participant, you do not have to ask them if they're a man or a woman. You just circle that yourself. Like, please don't go up to someone and say, hey, are you a man? Because that'll be that. On the right, there's a little box that's outlined in black. That box right here in the corner, please do put the date that you go. So if you're going on a Saturday and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I came across 10 people who wanted to do the survey. You only need 4, so please don't do more than you need to. But it's good to know that there's certain areas that are super busy compared to others on certain dates. We'll look at that later. If you could put the start time and end time, so if you are there at 3 a.m., it's good to know that there's actually fishermen there. And it will be taking note of that.
So just to clarify, start time is when you arrive, not when you start doing the survey.
Yes, when you arrive there.
What is the expected length of the time? How many minutes, how many hours?
Well, it takes, there's certain sites that are only 10 minutes away from here. There's certain sites that are an hour drive from here. The surveys themselves, since you have to do 4 surveys per site, each survey takes about 5 minutes to conduct. If you do 4 surveys, that's 20 minutes. If it took you an hour of driving there and an hour of driving back, the max amount of time it should take you is 2.5 hours to do one set of surveys. But a lot of the locations are right next to each other, so if you go a mile down, you'll see another posted sign, and you could actually do 8 surveys all in one day. So that hour drive isn't so bad.
So start time is from the time you start driving or from the time you arrive there?
The time that you arrive there and the time it took you to conduct that survey. So the minute you get there or whenever you're there, it doesn't, the start and end time is just, it's not for paying you, it's for us just to know around what time you got there, just to see who you surveyed. If you surveyed in the morning versus the evening, it does not have to be an accurate minute calculation. We're not going to time it by the minute or anything like that. It's I'm sure I'm sure that there's going to be times where a survey might take you only a minute, whereas there's going to be times where someone asks you a lot of questions and it might take up 20 minutes. So
Since you mentioned about the driving time, some of them is 1 hour away. We start time when you start to drive, or at the time
you arrive there.
Yeah.
Yes. Just because the only reason we have this start and end time is just to know when you were there at the site. If you were there at 5 in the morning, or if you were there at 6 in the afternoon, we just want to know when this survey was actually done. The end time, the reason why we're trying to gauge that is because we want to see how long it took you to interact with people. So sometimes your start time might be 5 o'clock, and then you're done with the survey at 5:02. There's going to be times where you start the survey at like 5 o'clock and the person keeps asking you questions and asks a lot, and they might take up a half hour of your time. We just want to know and gauge that because we don't know. We've never done this before. We've never done a survey evaluation. So this is just for our own records to know how long it's taking you. I mean, I've conducted the survey with random people just to see how long it took me, and it's always about 5 minutes. But again, you might have a very different experience, and we just want to keep track of that. So,
Kit, so each survey is for each participant,
yes,
and each survey has its own start and end time as well.
yes.
So the question is then, how do we show that? Is it going to be the same for both person? Since they're at the
So
same
you'd have
site?
different start times. So let's say your first survey, you get there at 5.
Mhm.
You don't have to, again, these are just rough estimates. If you want to start counting the time of like you getting there and put that start time and then the time it took you to conduct one survey, you can put that down as the end time. The second survey you do at that site, because you have to do 4, it might only last a few minutes. We're just trying to gauge how long it took you that day to get all 4 surveys. So you'll have 4 different surveys. You're going to have 4 different start times, 4 different end times. The first start time might be, again, I'm going to keep saying 5 o'clock, and then your last survey might be 6 o'clock. It ends, and we know that, it took you roughly an hour to do all 4. But that's not going to be your analysis. That's going to be my own, just so I know approximately how long it took somebody per site. But if you want to start conducting, if you rather have the start time the minute you start interviewing someone, that's okay too. Again, these are just rough start times, rough end times. We're not expecting complete accuracy on those.
Yeah, and sometimes when they're still fishing, you can't just sit there and talk with confidence. You can be there. Catching a fish, you have to wait for a little while until they get the fish, and then you talk to them again. So
Right.
Like, 15 minutes to get one down, okay?
Exactly, and it's good to know because if you're there at, again, 3 in the morning, they're going to be out there fishing, but they want you to be quiet. So if you have a 5-minute survey, we're hoping that they agree to it, but they might not. So these are all things that.
So you need to provide us lights, lamps, everything else, right? GPS and fishing pole and everything, so we can.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Those details.
So, the way your agency decides to conduct the survey will be primarily what you decide. It's not we're just giving you the tools to conduct the survey, like the questions and things like that. But any way you decide to carpool, if you want 2 people to do the surveys, or if you want your whole staff to be out there, these are all things that you're all going to have to decide. We're just granting money for the overall project, and it's been broken down based off of your certain fees for administration and things like that. But again, I'm sure you'll have a staff meeting after me leaving deciding these things, or if they've already been decided. So for the introduction, this is just a basic introduction. You're just going to ask if they have a few minutes to answer a short survey. You're just going to say you're from the Delta Mercury Exposure Reduction Program. If you'd like to also explain you work for the Southeast Asian Assistance Center, that's up to your discretion. We're just saying if you mention the program, it might be easier so that they know you're talking about fish.
Before I
Yes.
forget, I was thinking about whether you guys could provide us some sort of ID that we are working for the government Delta Mercury Exposure Reduction Program, just in case people are wondering, are you legit, and so
Sure.
forth. That might be
Okay.
helpful for us.
All right, I'll actually take a note of that. So that is actually a good thing to note. It would be ideal that you do also have some other valid form of ID as well, because if I do provide any ID, it's not going to be anything official. So if you do have your driver's license or a different form of ID as well, confirming your name, it'll be good. So after the introduction, if they do say yes to the survey, you continue down to the questions. If they say no, you thank them for your time, you go ask somebody else. And then if they say no, the start time, you can leave it if you want, and you would go to another person. It doesn't, you're not limited to rewriting the start time every time you go to a new person. It's whenever you end the first survey that you would put the end time.
How do we know how many people decline the survey?
So when you're there, you would ask if they said yes or no, and if they say no to you, you would just tally. You would on.
Can we just do like one blank to just say no to this, and then write another one so you know how many no and yes? Or you don't want to know the no? You only want to.
We do want to know the no. And so for everywhere that it says no, everywhere that it says site summary, right here listed on the page, the site summary is the last page of the the document. So it's site summary is where you're going to put all of your survey information. So it'll have the site name. It'll say the number of people who were surveyed. So, but it's good to know that it just proves. So that's the reason why that's a great point that you brought up. If 20 people say no, but they're fishing at that location, you made a note of that, then that means at least we posted a sign where people fish. I mean, maybe they're not friendly fishermen, but at least they said no. And that's good for us to know. So all data is good data. We don't want you to hide it.
Take it away and don't give it back until they see.
Yes. So on the site summary, if you're at the site, you could see that there's 20 people out there, and you count 20 people. You would say on this line right here, you would say total number of people using the site.
20.
You'd put 20, and then all the people who said the number of people who were surveyed. So if you only got 3, you would say 3. If you got 4, you would say 4. And then here you would say number of people who declined. You said 15 people declined. You would put that down, and then you would say total. I tried talking to all 20 people, or I didn't try talking to all 20 people. There was 20 people there, but the first 4 people already said yes to the survey, so I didn't need to talk to the others.
But if they see you counting
16.
them, they will run away or shoot you or something.
They can't shoot you on public land. They really shouldn't shoot you at a park either.
If you counting them to warn them.
You might not want to point at them as you count, but I think
you really don't know how long you're going to spend at that site.
right. And again, I wish I could give you an accurate number. I wish I could say, there's always going to be 4 people at this site. But I don't know. These sites that we posted primarily are fishing places. There's actual parking for boats. There's lots of people who are either members there or literally fish right off the pier. These are not very hard sites to find people. And let's say you've gone to the place at, again, at 3 a.m. and 5 p.m. and you call me and you say, hey, I've been here both times of the day. There's nobody here. I was a Saturday. Even a Saturday, I couldn't find anybody. You let me know, and I'll take a note of that. And that's at least a way for us to record that, hey, maybe we posted a sign where there's actually not any fishermen there. That's important for us to know. But we're going to try to get as much data as we can, because our goal is that everyone surveys 4 people per site. There's 25 sites, and we have a total of 100 surveys. But if we only find 3 people per site and you go to 25 sites, that's still 75 surveys. And that's enough data that we can report back to all these agencies and say, hey, look, we had people out there surveying, and this is all the information we got. And hopefully the survey it doesn't present too many problems. We tried to make it very simple. So we'll just go over the questions very quickly. But again, if you do come across any questions later, let me know. So the first question is really important, because if you come across any children and they're not with their parents, we legally can't survey them. So if they're under 18 and their parent isn't with them, they can't be surveyed. So if they're under 18 and let's say they're 17 and they're like, this is my dad, you have to ask the dad. You can say, hey, can he take the survey? And if the dad says yes, then you can proceed to take the survey. But you have to make a note of that. So one of the questions here is provide a tally of yes or no in site summary. So on that site summary page, which is that last page, site summary, it's going to ask you number of observed unaccompanied minors. So anybody who doesn't have a parent with them and is there, it's good to know. We'll be like, wow, there's so many 12-year-olds fishing at this site. It's, again, information that we as the agency would like to know. Even if you don't, the whole goal of the survey, it sounds kind of weird, but there's no great way of this survey. Like, there's no right way. Like, if there is nobody there, that's still great news for us, because then we know moving forward how to post. And if we find later on that there's actually not any adults there and they're just children fishing, then that's also something good for us to know. But every site's going to be different. But primarily you will run across adults. Primarily there'll be more than 4 people there, especially if you go during those times. So if you do go outside of those times, if you're not seeking the survey, again, between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., if you go at 9 a.m., the only reason we give you those times is because we know the most amount of fishermen are going to be there. If you go at a later time and you jot it, we're not going to throw away the survey. We just know you're going to have a harder time finding people to survey. You're going to go out there and there's only going to be maybe one person. Maybe you might have to stay there an hour before you see somebody. So that's why we gave you those fishing times. But let's move on to the question 2. Do you fish in the name of the advisory region? So let's say you're at a site and you're in Sacramento. You would say, do you fish in the Sacramento River or Northern Delta? You would say, do you fish here? And let's say you're in Stockton. You would say, do you fish in the San Joaquin River? Because there's 3 different advisory regions. Each site will have an advisory region. So when we provide you the site information with the parking information and everything like that, we'll tell you which advisory region applies. Also, the sign that's posted there at the site will always tell you where you are. So,
But kid, it seems to me that they're already fishing there.
mhm.
So the answer would be yes.
Yes. Or you might come across somebody who's not a fisherman. So they might be near the sign, they don't have a fishing pole,
Okay.
and you don't know if they fish or not. But yes, this is very similar to that one question where you, above, where it's male or female. If someone's holding a fishing pole in front of you and is fishing, you might not need to ask them if they fish there because you already know the answer. So if you come across someone already fishing, you're right. You just answer yes for them. This is why we don't ask you to hand the survey to anyone. We ask you to do it yourself. That way they don't get offended or think you're stupid. So moving to question 3, it's have you seen this fish consumption advisory sign before? So when you go out in the field and that pre-checklist, there's going to be a few different things. There's going to be a clipboard, there's going to be pens, blah, blah, blah. There's also going to be this. You're going to take a sign with you. There's going to be a sign posted at the site, but if you're 100 yards away, it might be really hard to say, hey, have you seen that sign before? And they might be like, which sign? So you're going to hold the sign and you're going to say, hey, have you seen this sign before? And they'll look at it and they'll say, no. And it might be 5 feet away from them, but you need to take note of that.
Okay, yeah.
And they might even be standing right in front of it and they'll be like, no, I haven't seen it. And I've come across that and I was like, okay, I guess we didn't use enough bright colors, but it just, yes.
Sorry, kid, I have a question. So when it comes to this sign, I guess the questions in general, knowing what is it that they're trying to get at, are we only supposed to ask the questions the way they are written, or can we deviate to convey the meaning of the question? So like, for example, on this one with the sign, we can ask like, have you seen this sign before? And or like, have you seen this sign around the area, or have you seen this sign?
Yes. So if you do deviate from the question, as long as you get the question out there, I agree. It's where these questions are listed here for you. If you want to follow them exactly, go for it. But if you do not, it's not going to change the results of our survey. If you say, have you seen the fish sign here? Or have you seen this sign in front of you? Then it's not going to change the results either way. We want you to feel comfortable giving the survey. We are not expert surveyors. This is probably the first time you've ever had to conduct a survey out there, or at least a fish survey. This is just for us to gather some data. It's very simple. Have people seen the sign? People even care about the sign. That's all we're trying to gather information about. And these questions are just guidelines, but if you really don't know how to word the question, this has been tested to be the best way. So
the
the
project before, about the years ago, like 10 years ago, we had
6
a
years.
fish project.
yes, this is the same one. It's
Sorry, and then going back to the sign though, if they say, yes, I have seen it before, but not at that site, like say that they do fish in other places,
so.
that would still count under, they see the sign?
Yes, so if they've seen the sign before, that's still good. Like that means, because a lot of the locations are very close to each other, so if they didn't even see it there, but they saw it a mile away, that still means we've been posting in a good area. So for the next two sections, which is 4 and 5 of the questions, this is going to be the part that you're going to use, like you said, you're going to have to word it in a way that helps people understand, because a lot of people are English second language speakers. We don't expect you to, if they speak Russian and you're out there and you only speak Tagalog, we don't expect you to all of a sudden learn Russian. But we do hope that because it's so many pictures and you'll be pointing to things, that they'll be able to answer the survey. So on number 4, it says, can you tell me what you understand from the sign? So you can point to things. You can say, do you understand this section? Do you understand what this is? Do you understand these things? And there's listed little check boxes, right? So men and older women versus children and women. So if they see the little icons, they're like, oh, that's a woman, that's a man. They're two different things. If they are able to understand components of the sign, check mark it. So the reason why we're doing this is because when you go out there, people are going to give you very brief responses. They might say, red is bad, this is okay, green means go, this is good. They might say, oh, there's a fork here, it says don't eat. Or they might just, be more comfortable with the dial. They might point to Sacramento River. They might point to just the website, or they'll say, oh, it looks like this has to do with the government. They might say whatever they might say, we don't know. But these are just listed on number 4 of things that we think you might come across. And we also left a little extra box saying other. So if they point to something and they don't understand, so they might point to this or, and they might be like, what does that or mean? It means you can either have 7 servings a week, or you can have 3, or you can have 1 of these, but you can't have 7 of this, 3 of this, and this. It's an or. But that might be confusing to someone, and they might not understand. But these are all things that we hope to take note of.
Man, this is really hard. Because they're fishing, they don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to talk about it. So,
and that
so-
we decide
Yes, that's why you
that.
try to catch them before they go fishing.
right.
I know, this is
Not
hard, you know.
fishing.
And they might not want to talk, so they might just tell you some basic things.
More than 25, 30 minutes. 25, 30 minutes.
No,
This actually, because people don't like to talk, you'll be surprised. This might not actually take as long as you think. They might say, no, I don't understand anything. And then on question 5, it says, what do you find confusing about the sign? They might say, I don't understand any of this. And then you have to check off all those boxes and be like, all of this is confusing for them. Or they might not know why there's certain fish here and not here, or why this is this section. Again, these are all things that you're going to explain in challenges observed. This little explanation is going to help us. And so you're going to have 4 different explanations because you're going to have 4 different surveys at the site. At the end, when you answer number 5, you don't have to put it all in section C. You don't have to do it right then and there. But you might notice, like, after you get 4 surveys, you're like, we faced people who didn't want to answer this question. Some people only wanted to answer it for a couple minutes, or we had people talk for 10 minutes or half hour. These are all things you can list off. Whatever challenge you have faced answering that, because this is something that hasn't ever been evaluated before. So we're just trying to get back any feedback. We're not trying to look for just good answers. We're also here trying to hear what people really feel about these signs. Because if these are meant for fishermen and fishermen hate them, then we need to know that so we can improve them for the future. So that's 4 and 5 they're probably the most complicated part of the survey, because you're just asking people what they can take away from the sign, if they understand any of the messaging. And you might also need to explain if you feel like if there is a better way to address this question. When you start doing more surveys, you're like, actually, I phrased this question this way, or I started asking people this way. Then that's a good way of keeping a note of that. So when other people go out into the field, they might want to use it the way that you phrase the question, because there might be different ways of phrasing it with different people. If you're asking a kid who's 12 years old what they take away from the sign versus an adult, it's going to be different. And again, whatever information you can gather, we appreciate. So don't feel super pressured that you need all of these people to check off all of these boxes. At the end of question 4, it's going to ask, are 3 or more boxes checked? So for all of question 4, all of this, are 3 checked? And if they are, you do yes. And the reason being is because there's signs like this that are posted in the Sierra Nevadas near Tahoe. They did a survey like this too, and they realized that if you have at least 3 messages that are taken away from a sign, then that proves that the sign is effective, because it takes about 7 times for a person to look at a sign and actually remember what it says. The first time they see a sign, they don't actually care what it says. So it with all of this information that's written on here, it's going to take a few times of that person going fishing there to even remember what fish is in which section. We're not trying to test people's memory. We're just trying to see what they take away from the sign. So with number 6, it's the last question. There's this question some people will not feel comfortable answering. So if that's the case, you're going to click unknown. And you can say unknown, they didn't want to answer, or unknown, they walked away from me before I had a chance to ask them. Whatever the case may be, after question 5, they might not want to still be there because they've taken up too much time and they said, I want to go fishing now. Like, I don't want to answer any of your questions. That's why we left this question for the end. If you can note what ethnicity they are, you can show them the list. So show list is here. So you show the participant the list, and if they see one of the ethnicities, they can say, oh, I'm Cambodian. So you check it off for them. But if there's something that's not on here, let's say they're Kenyan, then you would check off other, and you'd write in Kenyan. But again, this is optional. So then the conclusion is you would say something along these lines. You would say, thank you for your time. I hope this was helpful. And when you're out surveying, you're going to have some materials with you. You'll have either brochures for the San Joaquin River, or you'll have brochures for the Sacramento River. You're going to ask, well,
you speak Hmong, would you like a brochure in Hmong? And they'll be, either they'll say yes or no, and you can either give it to them or not. And if they have, now that we've provided you training on the advisories, whatever information you want to give them regarding mercury, if they have questions about mercury, you can tell them, by the way, mercury comes from here, or whatever they are willing to learn, you can provide them that information. So the last few bullets is provide them appropriate materials, and then note which materials you provided them. So under the additional notes and observations section, which is letter C, additional notes and observations, at the very end, you said, I gave out 6 brochures in Tagalog. And most of the people here speak Tagalog. That would be an observation, and that was something that we'll note that, hey, in Rio Vista, a lot of people who speak Tagalog fish here. So that's, again, just information that we're going to collect at the very end. So you provide them those brochures or whatever they say. If they say no, just say thank you. And then that's the end of one survey. So you did all 6 questions, and you're done with one survey. Then you do 3 more surveys or 2 more surveys for that site. And then at the very end, you're going to, there's a post-survey checklist. So let's say you're done with all the surveys. You've done this 3 or 4 times. The post-survey checklist, you're going to take pictures of the posted signs. So you're there and you say, oh, here's the sign in front of the bathroom. You're going to take a picture of it. This will show us, because these signs have been posted up to 6 years ago, if the sign has been damaged or destroyed or anything of that sort, we'll be able to look at the picture of it, the current picture of it, and show, oh, actually after 6 years this sign's been doing great. Or, oh no, our sign has been completely, it has graffiti on it or whatever it may be. So that's why we ask you to take pictures of the sign. And then the post-survey, this is just so you can check off what you needed. So you have completed the questions forms, you completed the site summary form, you still, the sign that you were carrying around, you have it with you. You didn't leave it somewhere. It's just, this checklist is just for you to remember to do all these things. And then the remaining educational materials, just make sure that you bring those back. So when you get back to SAAC, at the end of every trip, whenever that may be, so let's say you did it in the evening, the following day when you come back to SAAC, or whenever you do come back to SAAC, you would drop off the sign, you drop off your questions, you drop off all of these 5 things. Unless you're doing multiple days. So again, if you're going to be doing surveys for 4 days straight, you wouldn't keep dropping off the sign. You'd keep it until you're done with all of the different forms.
The sign we are carrying with us, that's about this size?
They're this size. They're exactly this. They're going to have different river names, but they're going to be this size. And these are exactly what are posted outside of places at the moment. Sometimes you'll go to a park, and there's no road grade sign, but it's a poster. And the poster is posted into a kiosk. It's like a built-in little holder for posters, and they're usually right by.
Right?
Yeah, they have glass in front of them. So it might it might look like this, it might look like a glass container with a sign like this in it. So for the site summary, I know we've been going over it, but you're gonna again say the site name. So you'll say what the condition of the sign is. So you'll take a picture, but you'll also let us know if it's missing, if it's damaged, or there's like obstructed, so there's a tree in front of it, or a bush has grown on top of it, or I don't know, someone put a poster on top of our poster, whatever it may be, you're gonna check it off and explain, like obstructed, right? It's
Already in the
yeah.
picture.
Yeah, it's in the picture, but even sometimes the picture we can't tell. Like it might still be obstructed, even though you took a really good picture. If you stand a foot away from it, yes, it's great. You might see that the sign's still there. But if you stand 5 feet away from it, there might be a giant tree blocking the way. We won't know that unless you tell us. So that's going to be that question. The number of people surveyed, again, is it 3 or 4 people? Did you not survey anybody? You went to the site and there's nobody there. All things to take note of. People who said no to the survey, like I said, if you have 20 people saying no, it's good to still know that there's 20 people there. Like all of this information is still important to us. And total number of people at the site. So what you would do is you would take the number of people surveyed, people who didn't survey, and you could add that way, or you can count the number of people manually. It's up to you. The number of people observed unaccompanied minors, again, this is the number of children that were there that didn't have parents with them. So, in response to question 3, are there 3 or more boxes checked? Sorry. I already know that there's an error. Sorry. I meant to say, I have to change this. Ooh, I'm so sorry. This is now, it's because I was rushing this morning.
Question 4.
It's actually, it's not 3, it's question 4.
Page 7.
So, sorry, let's go back. This should say 4, not 3. For question 4, you're going to go back to your 4 surveys. So, for survey number 1, you have somebody said yes to, you have a yes here, right? And on your second survey, you might have a no. And then you have another yes, and you might have another no. Then down here, when you collect all 4 surveys, you would say, 2 people said yes, they understood the sign. 2 people said no. And that's what you would do here. You would put the 2, whatever it may be, however many people you surveyed, you'd put that down. Does anyone have questions about that?
So this site summary form is to summarize the 4 people that were surveyed, and those 4 may not necessarily be conducted on the same day.
Right.
But this is to capture the 4.
Yes.
Okay.
So you might come back at different times of the day or different days, but this site summary is for that site for all 4 surveys.
So one site summary for like number of surveys, right? So here, the one survey has separate, dedicated separate site summary.
Mm-hmm.
It could be one site summary for 4 surveys.
Yes, I just didn't want to print out 4 surveys in a packet for you, because this is just an example so we can go over. When you actually start the process, you're going to be given 4 surveys and then 1 site summary per package. And you'll get 25 packages. This was just to go over today, and I already found a mistake, so I have to make a change. So again, challenges observed, like we talked about before, there's a section up here where you're going to say what your challenges were. You might, while you're taking the survey, you might really quickly write things down, and it might be really sloppy, or you wrote something really fast. During the site summary, you're going to be done with the whole survey process, and you're going to take all 4 or 3 of the surveys and just write a small little paragraph saying, I went 2 days, I didn't find anybody, or I went in 1 day and I saw like 50 people there, and the challenge was I didn't know who to survey, or there was too many children, or whatever the challenge may be. I'm just giving examples. I don't know what you're going to come across. You might go there and you might realize that the place is, because it was posted 6 years ago, the place now is really run down and there's too much trash everywhere. Whatever the site conditions are, you can do that. Any additional notes or observations? This is more specific. This is optional. So if you come across anybody and they want brochures in a language we don't offer, you might want to take a note of that. Say, today I went and I did not have a brochure in Swahili. So that's something that we would want you to take down. But again, if your section here doesn't fit in these lines, you can also go down into this section as well. But this site summary, when we get all 25 site summaries, we're going to compile those into a final report. And that final report is going to be from Southeast Asian Assistance Center, and it's going to be submitted to all 4 agencies, and we're going to be able to evaluate what happened. So it's very important that even if your 4 surveys are messy and it's your own handwritten notes, that the site summary is very clear and legible, because that's the main part that you're going to be using to write your final report. So, does anyone have questions? I know that we went over this fast and we were jumping back and forth, but later on, if you do have questions, feel free to give me a call. My business card is right there. I'm going to be leaving these materials with you. In the next few days, the survey project is still getting, the contract is still getting approved. Again, it's taking a long time because it's just a lot of back and forth between agencies and people paying for it. So once it's signed off on and once we provide it to SAAC, we'll hit the ground running. I'll provide you the site list, give you all that information. As of now, if you in the next few days say, hey, this is confusing, or hey, we should reword this, or I don't like this, all of this feedback is helpful for me, because this is, again, the first time we're doing this as a program, and I appreciate your time. So thank you so much for letting me use so much of your staff meeting. I apologize it took so long. But we're going to be providing a very, very brief version of this follow-up training for your next staff meeting in September. It'll probably only be 10 to 15 minutes, and it's just going to be a check-in to see if you have any additional questions, and also if there's anything I can do to make the process easier. All right, thank you so much.
All right.